It's the same cosmological setting that we have in a way. One thing that I am working to correct in scientific discussion is the impression that people have that the Buddhists insist that mind is not material. That's what gives materialists an easy excuse to dismiss the whole evidence for reincarnation or rebirth, because of course that's senseless to a Western scientist. Now the thing is that in popular parlance, the Buddhists are very insistent that mind and matter is a dichotomy. That is to say, what is material is not mental, what is mental is not material. They insist on that in common parlance because for common people who are not scientists, in other words, the idea that if you could reduce mind to matter, then you would become materialistic and nihilistic, and you would think there's no future life that was meaningful, at least not that was meaningful to you, and you would become reckless and irresponsible the way the modern civilization has become, or modern culture has become. And so they're very determined to preserve this sort of absolute dichotomy between mind and matter. However, on the scientific level, they go past that, and they go through the theory of voidness, which is very much like what a theory of infinity really should be, because voidness is something like infinity. It's a pure negation. It's an absolute negation, really. It's not a positive description of a place or a thing, you know. Infinity is a way everything, and therefore it's not any one thing apart from other things, if you follow me. Like this is infinity here because you can't keep it out of anywhere, or it wouldn't be infinite, right? If you could restrict it from not being here, and if we think this here as being the finite and think that the infinite wasn't here, we would be distorting the meaning of infinite, because infinite has to be here too, right? So there's ultimately no dichotomy. So voidness is a concept like that. And based on that concept, all theories about reality are only relational perspectives. There's no absolute dogmatic reality is this way or that way, except for that negation in a way that reality is free of these dogmatic descriptions. But that doesn't mean, as people might think, that all descriptions are useless and we shouldn't describe things. Relational perspectives are crucial for when we're relating to things, and we always are. So theories are very, very important, but they are always subordinate to the reality, which is always elusive to their capture, you could say. So that being the case, you can, in some cases, reduce matter to mind and say the world is all mental, and that can be useful, but again, that's not an absolute dogma. And similarly, you can reduce mind to matter in certain cases, and that's also useful in some cases, like in Tibetan medicine, sometimes they do. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So in this light, at the very subtle level, mind is energy. For example, in the book in the Book of Natural Liberation, which I'll now call the Book of the Dead, because that's what it should be called, the Book of Natural Liberation, it is said that you drop your relationship with earth, water, fire, air, the four gross elements, and then the mind goes in sort of pure mind. But they acknowledge that that pure mind is embodied in a subtle energy form, which they say is not gross matter, but obviously energy is matter. You see, like according to modern science. So it's very, very subtle, like a virtual body, you know, like a matrix body or something. A matrix body is, you know, they stick the thing in the brain, you know, and it's only a metaphor, of course, because nobody's doing that yet. But, you know, you stick that thing in the person's brain, and then Neo runs around, and Trinity and Morpheus and so forth in the matrix. But they have their bodies in the matrix are subtle energy. It's an energy field, and they have energy. It's just not their coarse body, which is lying in the ship, remember, with the thing stuck in their head. So when you're in the bardo, it's the same cosmology, except nothing is stuck in your head. You have left your other gross body. And like when you're in a dream, the mind is shaped by pure imagery. It shapes a very subtle type of energy, sort of like neural energy, in a pattern outside the body. Sort of like when you transmit by satellite, you know, an email to somebody, or even a picture, a photograph, there's a full image there, and it's reduced to dots and dashes, and it goes and it reassembles some other place. But in a way, the whole image is moving in a very, very subtle plane, right? And when we say it reduces to, it's a little vague when you get down to the quantum level. What really is going on, nobody really knows, right? So the cosmology of there being a plenum of energy that has its gross moments and subtle moments, and where there is no loss of energy ever, and there's no new energy created out of nothing ever, actually. Now that's where Western science is currently stuck, because they are still stuck in the theistic notion that subliminally, they don't know that, but that there has to be a first beginning out of something, and so they create this insane Big Bang theory, which came out of Einstein's mistake, that he thought that you had to have a first beginning because he was like brought up listening to the Bible, you know. And there is no first beginning, it's beginningless. And it's always been going on. There have been crunches and there have been expansions and contractions, of course, and they go on being them. And then there's, since an infinite thing, one area is contracting, another area is expanding simultaneously. There's just no limit. And that's really important. So you don't need some sort of an insane idea like a Big Bang, where nothing creates everything suddenly with an infinite explosion. I mean, which is, if that could ever happen, it's always happening. What would ever stop it? Since nothing could produce infinite energy at all times, we would all be exploding at all times. It's just completely senseless. And Buddhists get out of that by having beginninglessness. You don't worry about that. It's not a vicious infinite regress. It's just a natural infinite regress, right? So the cosmological, you know, minus a few cramping ideas that are still plaguing the West because of their fear of infinity, actually. The Buddhist cosmology of this is the same. It's just simply basically the law of the conservation of energy. Your consciousness is a kind of energy, very subtle, and it holds its structure in the brain, using the neurology of the brain rather than the brain creating it. And it uses the brain, and that's why human embodiment is very valuable, because it's very complicated and can take all the patterning in the very subtle energy flow. But on the other hand, but it does not only dependent on the brain, it can then maintain that pattern outside of the brain as well. And as is proven by so much evidence of out-of-body experience, near-death experiences, so many different kinds of things. Even dreams really are proof of it. And so that's the cosmology of all of those things, with the caveat that the Western philosophy is not as fully relativistic yet as the Buddhist science. And it's still catching up, but it's very close now with quantum discoveries and the discoveries of indeterminacy and uncertainty and things like that. If they weren't afraid of that, and they would really cope with that, then they'd be getting to the level of where they would realize that your greatest tool of observation, your greatest scientific machine, is the brain itself, the mind itself of the human being. And therefore the mind can discover things on its own without metal machinery and plastic machinery and so forth, that will be even more profound than what they have already discovered with relying only on machines, you know. So, but then, which is a time coming, perhaps, you know, we hope, you know. The dialogues between the Dalai Lama and the scientists, and the Dalai Lama's people and scientists, are sort of, from the Tibetan side, that's what they're hoping for, basically a yogic science that will develop, you know. And I mean, science already is yogic in the sense that scientists are yoked to their quest for reality, but they're just limited by their misinterpreted dogma of materialism to distrust the evidence of their own inner sense, you know, and not really develop that inner sense as they could. Their training doesn't include samadhi training, which it should, right?